when a marketer goes, I can't give you that because measurement is really difficult. This is not how marketing works. Building a mental image in someone's mind is not about generating an immediate lead, because it can take months or years for the consideration. When are they in market? How do you educate them? How do you remain top of mind? How do you deliver value? How do you build a relationship? I can't quantify these things. And marketers are saying that CEOs don't understand that. And I think that's like one of many examples in marketing that founders don't necessarily get.
In this episode, I sit down with Oren Greenberg, managing partner at Curve. Oren's had a wealth of experience in marketing, starting in B2C, moving then into B2B, now advising software companies from startup to scale up to multinational, advising them around their marketing strategies and how they can drive growth. In this conversation, Oren's authenticity shines through, referring to himself even after 20 years of experience across all these different perspectives and contexts, referring to himself as a novice. And that speaks volumes about the mindset that we need to have as marketers, being open to try new things, being able to put aside our strongly held beliefs and adopting a test and learn mindset, emotionally disconnecting from our tactics and strategies. And at points I found myself intellectually challenged in this conversation, and some of my worldviews that have been strongly held being challenged. And I think that's a really important thing about Oren. This is like the antithesis to the typical content on marketing that you see, where you're looking for the 5 or 10 top tips that will drive growth. The reality is much more nuanced than that. And when you speak to someone that has this much experience across such wide a range of contexts of businesses, you start to appreciate that level of nuance, that level of learning and open-mindedness that we need to succeed in marketing. I really hope you find this conversation as interesting as I did. Oren, thank you so much for joining me today. I know over the past couple of weeks, we've got to know each other fairly well and discovered that we're fairly similar in terms of our worldviews. But let's get started with a bit of your background. Do you want to explain to our listeners how you've got to where you're at today and the journey that you've been on in marketing, most specifically B2B, if that's all right?
Sure. That's a good question. I actually started as a 3D animator and I couldn't find work. So I ended up applying for like 120 jobs. And I remember one of the jobs, the guy said, look, when you don't have the skills, I'm sorry. And I was like, okay, fine. I'll work for free for 2 weeks. And then he's like, no, I'm sorry. Okay, I'll work for a month for free. And it's like, no, I'm sorry. And it's like, look, I'm going to work for like 2 months. I work for free. Just give me an opportunity. I remember being quite desperate for work. And he said, you'll go very far with that attitude. And I think that kind of, that is a key part that's been relatively consistent over the last 20 years. It's the attitude. Well, I think a lot of the opportunities that have opened up, most like, I think up until some point it was serendipity. And after many years, it was, getting a series of wins, successful case studies and building network and familiarity. But essentially, the whole point here is not to give people a kind of sequential order of, all the work I've done, but to kind of go, I had a plan and then reality happened and the gap between them are worlds apart. And I hadn't expected to end up the way I ended up. But essentially, I ended up in marketing somehow. People just gave me, I remember, I showed up to the meeting with a suit and she looked at me and she's like, why are you wearing a suit? And I was like, awkward. And she just took a punt on me. I remember I was like really hungry and eager. I was like, I'd work really hard. Just please give me a chance. This is like a long time ago. Nowadays I say, if I can even be bothered to shout for a call, And then I just started a series of working at VC-backed businesses. And I think working in VC-backed businesses unlocked huge opportunity because they had an influx of cash with a lot of people who don't know what they're doing. And then whenever you put that together, it's a very interesting case of, I don't know, some sort of financial dynamite. It's either blows up in the right direction or blows up and it's in tatters.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think about 2015, 2016, that's probably good 10 years into my career. I kind of decided to become independent. I actually became independent 2013, but in terms of starting to work with like big brands, well-known brands like Investec Bank and HomeServe and Canon, Lenovo, British Telecom, kind of started from that 2016 period over the last 8 years or so. And yeah, I mean, running the agency, lots of different clients, lots of different experiences, doing consultancy, lots of really rich experiences. I work with so many businesses now. It's very hard to provide a linear. Over the last 8 years, it's just been chaos with lots of different businesses with different capacities, solving different problems. It's like there is no one thing that I've been doing. Um, yeah, that's a very messy summary.
It's so interesting. I know you work a lot with like startups and get into advisory with startups these days. So let's get into it actually, especially with some of those startups that you advise in a marketing capacity. What are some of the common like misconceptions of marketing that you're encountering? Some of the
Mhm.
challenges.
Yeah, it's very variable from business to business and from person to person based on their context and experience. But I'd say a lot of them, they want to broadcast what they're about to everyone. They're kind of, if we just shout to everyone about what we do, people pay attention, things will gravitate towards us. And I think after you've been in marketing for such a long time, you develop a very cynical view where
I
I
hear
think I
that.
don't yeah, it's like you realize how saturated everyone is with cold emails that they don't read, they don't care. People trying to flog them things to them on LinkedIn ads or posts or webinar funnels. And in business, so much of it is less about being genuinely helpful, and so much of it is about trying to sell you something, even if you don't need it or want it. And I think it's because people are under performance pressure to deliver a result in a limited time frame, and they don't really know how to achieve that constrained. So it's a lot of constraints, and you have so many variables you're contenting with. Is the product good? Is the brand established? Right? Like, is the funnel set up properly? Is the tracking in place? Like basic things. How are you collaborating with other people? Is the product market fit? Right? A lot of foundations. So I think a lot of the challenges the businesses have is really building notoriety and trust with a tight ideal customer profile, a tight
Mm.
ICP, and being well known. And I think the reality is that this takes years, and no one wants to hear that because everyone needs to hit their quarterly target. That's like right now, next 3 months. I don't care what happens in 5 years. Don't talk to me about building brands. Then there are misconceptions that are rife across different levels. I think what people don't really understand is the fragmentation of marketing. A product marketing manager cannot do what a PR manager can do, cannot do what an SEO expert can do, cannot do what a Facebook ads expert can do. It's like the skills fragmentation is immense. Um, it gets worse when you think about MarTech because there's so many different tools and kit in marketing that makes it harder. Then you need to add in channel mix, and then it's like the proliferation of the combinations of those means it's an incredibly fragmented landscape, especially if you start thinking about industry, geography, different client sizes. Like selling something that's £10,000 a year compared to something that's £100 a year, completely different motion, completely different tech stack, completely different team, completely different approach, completely different message. So I think people underestimate the complexity of fragmentation. I think because it's it's too much for the human brain to like comprehend. I think we're reluctant to deep delve into the complexity because it just leaves us like paralyzed. So I think part of it is like like observational, like human behavior, and part of it is literally a lack of experience or knowledge. Like you really need to read a lot, talk to a lot of people, consume a lot of content, run a lot of failed experiments over many years. And I think even 20 years in, like if you ask me my competence when it comes to marketing, I'd say I'm still like novice. That's like ludicrous. I've been doing it for longer than a lot of people, especially digital marketing. Digital marketing is still relatively new in the domain of marketing, traditional marketing as a whole. And I was there in the ancient days where all the current marketing influencers were doing little roundtables with 20 people in a room. If it was Rand Fishkin with SEO or, paid search with periscopics or whatever. Um, so yeah, I think the fragmentation is overwhelming. But yeah, lots of misconceptions. How to build a brand, what brand means, how to acquire customers, what like the effect of nurturing, how to set up retargeting, what's the difference between analytics and attribution. So much, so many. I don't know where to start. It's like every week, it's like things that you take for granted that people don't know, and you're like, how do you not know this? It's like, oh well, yeah, I've been doing that, and then you realize it's just very specialized. It's just very, very specialized for someone who's not as immersed or not as familiar.
So interesting. And there's a couple of directions I want to take this conversation based on what you said. So So firstly, let's talk about how are you approaching these founders? I guess it's predominantly founders that you're dealing with, where they've had an influx of cash, they want growth immediately, which is naturally diametrically opposed to what you were just talking about, brand building, all the things that we know to be true in marketing. So how are you trying to bridge that gap between, hey, I've got to hit quarterly numbers, um, but we also know that B2B growth happens over a longer time horizon. So how are you advising? How are you approaching that problem?
Yeah. So I think first it's important to know that I have a range of businesses I work with, all the way from kind of pre-revenue, like which I don't typically work with, but I have he's a two-time exited founder, so I took him under my wing, and he's great to work with actually, all the way to like 1 to 2 mil revenue, 10 mil revenue, and 100 mil ARR. So I have like a very strange spectrum of clients, and I think part of it is, because it comes through recommendation and referral and network. You don't know who's going to pick up and reach out to me because of a successful post on LinkedIn. I don't know. It's inbound, it's not outbound. So that's probably why I have such a strange, and because of that, it's very diverse how I tackle this challenge, because 100 mil ARR business selling to a very specialized persona, like a CMO for the largest retailers in the world, is very different than one of my ones, which is like, probably 5K annual contract value, which is, for a small business of up to 50 employees, completely different universe of complexity. So I'd say if we look on the one that's, let's say, 100 mil ARR, the way I think about it is like dating. You can't build a brand by just building brand. Like, you can't just get married because you want to get married. It's all about the quality of touch points of dates that lead to the marriage. And you just need to make sure you're essentially dating as frequently as possible with the highest quality date with your target audience. And that builds brand. So the perception of brand is a symptom of the quality of content, of the quality of the material, of the quality of the value we deliver. So I just think of micro dose value. I don't think of brand like run a large TV ad campaign for 5 mil. Like, I've seen that. I saw a 2.4 million ad campaign. The ROI was minus 8,700%. I don't know. Like, the cost per acquisition was about 2.5K per customer, and I think the CPA came in at about £480,000 per new customer acquired. And you're like, but that's looking at it as a direct response channel. Is it a brand building channel? And you're just like penetrating people's awareness, and isn't that what brand is? Occupying mental space, being top of recall. And when they ran the campaign, they didn't have any measurement metrics to evaluate this, which is, you're kind of like, how do you spend 2.4 million and not even put basic metrics in place to assess tracking or awareness? So, that's why and I've seen a lot of these. I've seen like £280,000 taxi ad campaigns, and we measured it and they didn't do anything. I mean, on the flip side, I had one company, we did TV ads, and like 98% of all the growth came from just TV ads. But we had multi-channel, we're spending like 30 million a year in marketing, but the majority just came from one primary channel. So it's like, I'm not describing that above the line is wrong or TV is wrong. I'm just saying you really need to know what you're doing, who you're doing it for. But fundamentally, if you did one big splash in a 5-year period and you spent all your marketing money on one event, on one TV ad over a 2-month period, that didn't help you build brand, did it? Right. So if you think about it, brand is this consistent, repetitive exposure over time. And that's kind of a fundamental pillar of building an effective brand. So in my mind, how do you produce good quality content? And you kind of need to do that to hit short-term results anyway, right? Because how you producing short-term results is either like a paid ad on social or search that leads to some sort of landing page that probably has some sort of offer, if it's an ebook or a white paper, or if it's not gated, then it's a piece of unique research that shows expertise in a certain topic, right? Or it's like, I don't know, Cognism, where they like get 10 or 20 leads, so experience the value of the product, and it's a product-led growth funnel. But essentially, if you think about it, almost all successful marketing campaigns have two components: brand building awareness and direct response call to action. to drive a result. And they, the most effective ones combine them, where you lead with awareness and you follow up with a retargeting ad and drive a result. And that's the same with search and social. And the reason I reference search and social a lot is because the majority of paid ad marketing budgets goes to those two channels, right? The vast majority, I think 70% or whatever. So because I'm a digital marketer, I'm more focused on that as well. I know a lot more about that than I do about running billboards and physical events and this other traditional B2B stuff. So I guess that's my view on how to nurture and how to marry up brand and direct response. But saying that, it's very clear to me that businesses who raise more than 20, 30 mil that I've worked with, who are doing more than 10, 20, 30 million ARR, the conversations around brand come up much more often, and there's more of a focus and attention on them than hitting short-term sales target. And when you're on the lower end, it is clear that they talk about brand, but it's just not taking up as much real estate. The focus really is more on short-term than it is long-term. How do you deal with it? I think you just need to really deliver high quality value in a micro dosage and build that brand over time, even in a just direct response type mindset.
It's very interesting. I do like the phrase of micro dosage, of high quality content over a longer period of time. Makes perfect sense. I'm going to switch tracks because there's another area that you touched on that I'm interested to dive into more, which is around team and structure. So naturally, they're going to look very different depending on the type of business that you work with. But I'm wondering if you've got any views on what like a really good marketing structure looks like. You've spoken about like the educational gaps, you've spoken about the fragmentation of skill sets. So how can we round that out in a marketing dream team? How does that look in your mind?
Yeah. I think if we think about the spectrum, there's three kind of key foundational structures. There's everything's outsourced to agencies and freelancers, or everything's run in-house. So it's kind of got and then in the middle is a hybrid model. And I think to be effective today, you really have to balance the optimal hybrid model. And what is very clear, and I'm probably influencing, I think, about 40 marketers across all my clients at the moment. So I'm influencing about 40. And I think agencies, I don't know how many agencies, maybe 15 to 20 agencies all in. So, and I don't know how many freelancers, probably 8 or 9 freelancers or something. So it's very interesting for me to observe the difference. It's very clear that agencies and freelancers are specialists in a channel or their craft, right? Mm-hmm. But they very often have very poor understanding of what's happening inside the business in terms of the offer, the product, the target audience. And they're always playing catch up with the internal team. And what's very clear is the internal team very often really lacks the expertise to manage these channels. And because they're managing so many, they don't have the time to go deep on any individual one. So I think the reality is that coordination and product insight, like creating the briefs, articulating what's happening in the business, maintaining the strategy and the management does need to be really well run and tight in-house. And then I think when things kick off and you've kind of validated it and it's successful, at one point, you're better off probably bringing that in-house. If it's like, you're doing paid search and you're doing 100K a month, you're probably going to get better value for money if you in-house that. But when you're just starting out and you're doing Meta and Facebook ads and LinkedIn ads and SEO, and you're like, well, I don't know where growth's going to come from. I think businesses can run to in-house something that they think is going to perform, and there's no evidence for it, and it flops. And that was a very expensive mistake, where you could have got an agency and deployed more channels rather than just bringing that one specialist function in-house. So it's very variable from business to business. I don't think it's actually about team structure. And the more I work with more businesses, the more I realize it's about the quality of the individuals. And is there an optimal team structure? Maybe. I think it's so variable from company to company. The clients they're so varied. Like some of them are, like one of them is entirely dependent on affiliates, and that's how they scale their business. Another one just plays through intermediaries, but it's not affiliates. And then another one has a direct to market channel, go to market motion. So like the optimal team for each one of these is just, I can't generally say you should have a head of growth that reports into a VP of marketing, reports into the CMO with product marketing and paid search. And, it's like, where is the growth coming from? Who is the person who's managing that? How capable and competent are they? But what is definitely certain is marketers are overwhelmed across all of the clients with the volume of activity relative to the ambiguity as to where results are going to originate from. So the gap between I've got all these things I need to do and how confident I am in where the results will come from, there's a big gap between these two areas. And I think part of that is it's really that people don't know where growth will come from. That's a challenge.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And you're kind of advocating for early on, as businesses are early on, either early stage businesses or early stage into really understanding marketing, outsourcing through agencies or freelancers makes sense to get the specialism around those different channels and activities, which can help prove out where that growth comes from to ideally close that gap a little bit. Is that what you would say? Or is there any other practical advice to help close that gap? Because you paint a realistic but also very challenging picture.
I think the reason people bring me in as a marketing advisor is because they want to minimize that gap. And it's through experience that I know who to bring in from my network. I know how to go through the process of filtering who not to bring in. I know how to prioritize the resources, and I know what we really need to have in terms of the tech stack and the resources to deliver on a specific growth plan and tie that into the business plan. So I'd say you need to definitely bring that expertise into the business if you don't have it. And I think that's the problem with earlier stage businesses, is they typically can't afford the resource. And I think that's why fractional is growing in popularity, is because people want to have access to that. I don't know of like practical ways to bridge the gap other than, talking to a lot of people, reading a lot of information, trying lots of stuff and failing. And essentially, that's how I learned. So it's like, what you have to go through the motion if you don't have a more effective resource to hand to help you bridge that gap. But like, no one you meet is going to know where results are going to come from. No one's clairvoyant. They're not predicting the future. It's not like we live in the Matrix. So I think it really comes down to like robust methodologies, and it comes back to strong systems and processes. But really, you do need to have a dose of like knowing, oh, wait, we're a B2B business. Should we be running on Pinterest? Probably not. No, probably doesn't make sense for you. No, especially if it's like a hyper niche technical business. I had one the other day. What was it? The guy, CEO, he wanted to. They sell very specialized kit. Their whole total addressable market is 19,000 businesses worldwide. We want to do Dropbox. I'm like, what do you mean? Well, Dropbox grew, but Dropbox has 850 million users, and it grew through referral. Yeah, why don't we do that? Why don't we do referral? Well, do your target audience, do they even speak to each other? The 19,000? It's like, not really. How's referral practically going to work? Who's going to refer? How is it going to be that they're going to hear about it through referral? How's that going to work? And you kind of you see this as like such a common misconception, this idea of this is how Slack grew. Why don't we do that? Or this is how Notion grew. Why don't we do that? Or like, no, this is how like I don't know, Salesforce grew, like 1999, like fucking 30 years ago. It's like, why don't you go back 600 years? But this is how horse and drawn carriages grew. It's like, it's arbitrary, 30 years, 600 years. Like if you're going into the past, you're no longer dealing with the now and the variables you currently have with the constraints of reality. You didn't have GDPR 30 years ago, right? You didn't have like micro influencers 30 years ago, right? You didn't even have CRM. That's why Salesforce grew so much, because CRM was a shit show 30 years ago. So it's like, I think it's very interesting how people they go back in time conveniently to adapt and figure out the strategy for growth in the present with the variables that are currently known in your competitive set, with the current channel mix, with your brand notoriety. And I think a lot of it is discounted as if there is some sort of secret template. And I think part of it it's kind of like a fitness program. Like fundamentally, most people, they have a certain percentage of fat and lean muscle. And if you have certain stimuli, you're going to grow one or the other in some sort of activity. And like, I think we can pretty much agree this is ubiquitous across all human beings. We pretty much have the same biology. And because there's so many things in life that follow this pattern, the way a car is built, it's got an engine, it's got fuel, it burns it, the wheels move, you've got like these laws, these mechanics. And I think people assume the same is applicable to marketing. And we kind of know that, right? Brand and direct response and conversion rates and email marketing. Like we do know the fundamentals. But once you start getting into the nuance of marketing, it is so categorically specific in your competitor set with your target audience, with your specific offer, that a lot of these global rules that apply in global physics, when you get to like the atom level, Newtonian physics doesn't apply anymore. It's kind of the same. And I think, yeah, it just feeds into the misconception. Like, how do you bridge that gap? It's just experience. I don't think there's any other way to bridge it. I wish I had more concrete suggestions to give people who are listening more value, but I'm afraid I don't. It's specialist. It's expert. I don't really have a look. But if I did find a formula, I'd probably be one of the richest people in the world. So it's not like I'm against it.
But and it's refreshing to hear a realistic take, because fortunately you see so many different contexts, you understand the nuance, whereas what you'll see across a lot of other content or marketing oriented content across the internet, it will be someone within their one specific context. They have limited perspective and they'll say this is how marketing works in 2024. And as we all know, as you've perfectly articulated, that doesn't help other businesses understand the nuance. So whilst, yes, we'd all like to say, do these 10 things and growth will be solved, everything you say, even though it's somehow like it's uncomfortable to hear, and trust me, for the take of the podcast, I want Oren's like big hit. I want this one quote that's gonna be like, yep, that's gonna be the headline quote. But sometimes there isn't that. And that's okay, because this is the reality. And I'd rather people understand that and think, okay, this is complex, this is messy. But we're going to engage with this mess, and it's okay that not everything is going to fly. In fact, most of the things that you'll do won't fly, but it's the 10% of things that you do that actually fly that's going to make all the difference. As you say, there's always going to be one vector you find, whether it's affiliates in your example or whether it's webinars in the example of Content Cal. There's going to be one vector that will suddenly work for you. But yeah, I wish we could tell everyone what that vector was for themselves. But hey, I like the fact, I like your phrase of like, oh, I'm not clairvoyant. So I like that. But I think probably there is one truism here, though, and I'd be interested in your take, is about like a leadership or founder's understanding or at least appreciation of the importance of marketing. That's got to be a fundamental prerequisite for success of B2B, right? I do hear a lot of people like fighting their corner of like the marketing versus sales challenge. Interested in your take on that.
It's a can of worms you've opened up there, my friend. Yeah. I very rarely come across a founder who doesn't get marketing. But if you think about why that probably is, then why did they hire me in the first place? Like they wouldn't have hired me if they didn't think they
That's
need
true.
marketing. So
In
it's
your case, it might be a
no,
might
but
not be
also
the perfect example.
but also these marketers who say founders don't get marketing. It's like, well, if you're saying that and you've been hired as a marketer, what does that mean? Why would they hire marketing if they don't believe in it? So I think the argument isn't really binary, as in they don't get or they do get marketing. I think what they're trying to say there explicitly is you want to understand what KPIs, commercial KPIs, marketing is driving. What revenue is marketing driving? How many leads is marketing driving? Which leads are coming from sales or marketing? And when a marketer goes, I can't give you that because measurement is really difficult. This is not how marketing works. Building a mental image in someone's mind is not about generating an immediate lead, because it can take months or years for the consideration, whether they're in market, how do you educate them, how do you remain top of mind, how do you deliver value, how do you build a relationship. I can't quantify these things, and marketers are saying that CEOs don't understand that. And I think that's like one of many examples in marketing that founders don't necessarily get. Like, what's the difference between last touch and first touch attribution? But the truth is, a lot of marketers don't really fully understand this either, because it's very specialist and complex. But conceptually, once a marketer gets their head around it, they're trying to articulate it to a founder and the founder doesn't understand it. That's another gap. And when you start adding all of these gaps together, it kind of creates this mirage of they don't get marketing. But like, that's not true, because they wouldn't have hired you in the first place. So it's not that they don't get marketing, it's that there's a lack of alignment and a lack of education over the mechanics of how marketing works. What is good marketing versus bad marketing? And I think that's the issue. It's not do they get or don't get marketing. It's like good and versus bad. Bad marketing, generic message about our value and our benefit, broadcast that on as many channels as possible to as many people as possible. We're going to get a pipeline. That's bad marketing. That's the what you most marketers would say is the default for a lot of founders or CEOs and marketers, especially CFOs, or CTOs. So when it comes to marketing versus sales, it's very tricky, because the broad statement that happens there is throwing in all these different businesses with their different models into one bucket. If you're selling enterprise kit worth 250K a year and your total addressable market is 500 companies, you can't even build a custom audience on any social channel of that number of people that would get enough reach. Like for LinkedIn minimum, you need like 10,000 people. You probably don't even get that with 500 companies. And then when you go to Meta, no, you're not going to reach them on Meta. It's too broad. It's just going to burn your budget. And if it's super niche, there's not enough search volume in Google Ads. How are you going to reach these people? You just might as well pick up the phone or do direct mail, or invite them to an event, or send them an email, or send them a LinkedIn connection request and a message. And that's it. And cold call. That's it. Those are the channels of how you're going to access that. And that's how you're going to drive growth. And a lot of B2B businesses traditionally are kind of more in that category. They're hyper niche, they're very specific. And what people don't understand in marketing is marketing, because of privacy on all digital channels, is broad. You need a pretty large market to justify and get ROI on marketing. On terms of paid, obviously, I'm kind of just taking one aspect of marketing there, because you've got product marketing and you've got customer nurturing, you've got email marketing, you get event, you've got lots of types. I'm just kind of using where most people think of marketing as paid advertising, where most of the money goes. I'm just using that as a proxy. So I think that's where part of that gap happens. It's like people that, but if you're selling, like I said, like, a £5,000 a year piece of kit, you're not going to have a sales motion, because you're not going to get ROI on sales development reps and account executives trying to hit those businesses, because you need a minimum of 10 to 15,000 annual contract value to get ROI, to get return on investment. So you're not going to run a sales motion. So you see, you can't, in both of these two very different instances, say marketing versus sales, marketing versus sales. For one of them, sales no ROI. The other, marketing no ROI. Which one is marketing or sales? Now, saying that, there is culturally a strong bias towards sales, and I believe the reason is there's 5 times as many salespeople as there are marketers on LinkedIn. So
that's interesting.
So what
is
are
this
you
from all
more?
your LinkedIn data analysis?
This is from my
my
LinkedIn
we're
data
get into
analysis.
that in a second, actually.
My LinkedIn post. So if you think about that, people are reading more about sales, seeing more about sales. So if that, let's just take that as a status quo. People are consuming 5 times more content on sales. And then I asked you, what do you think is more effective, sales or marketing? Just that fact alone, what's going to happen? Mental heuristic. We know when you do behavioral economics, use Kahneman, the more someone's triggered by something, the more they believe, the more it comes to mind, the more they're likely to believe that's reality. It's one of our 138 mental fuck-ups that we have, heuristics. So there's a bias around sales. I mean, sales are probably more extroverted. Like if we looked at how many people are active, sales profiles are active on LinkedIn versus marketers producing content, it's now not 5x. It's now what? 10x, 25x, 50x, 100x? So think about it. There's so much more content about sales from so many more salespeople. It's not surprising there's a bias towards sales. And I don't think anyone's actually ever made this point. I think I'm the only person I know of who's ever made this point in terms of why there's this bias between marketing and sales. But if there is anyone, send me a message on LinkedIn. Let me know if anyone else has said this, because I don't know. But yeah, this is the data that I managed to dig out.
That's fascinating. Such an interesting take on it. And again, like I like your balanced approach of like debunking some of that, like that deliberately polarizing view, when the reality is, again, much more nuanced. And I do want to dig into that LinkedIn data. You referenced it. And tell me some of the kind of interesting insights that have come out of your LinkedIn data, particularly as it relates to some of the LinkedIn content performance insights. Because I saw a post from you on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago. I think it performed really well as well, related to what the type of posts that performed really well. Do you mind like digging into some of those stats if you got them to mind?
Yeah. So it is important that I note that I post almost daily. And if you think about it, for the last 8 months, how many posts that is, I don't know, 30 times 8. Um, and some of these posts, they're very cognitively demanding to do the research and run. But I am running at any given time like 5 or 6 different data projects, so it's hard for me to remember all of the stuff that I post. So it's quite ludicrous to be the guy who's like, you can't even remember what you said 3 weeks ago. But let me try and jiggle my mind a bit and get some of the insights that, like, see what pops to mind. So what I thought was really interesting was this idea of thought leadership and how few, and this is a data set based on 758 SaaS CEOs, and looking at about, I think it was like 24,000 posts. So like very large data set, like statistically significant. They only post, like the most prolific SaaS CEO only posts twice a week, the most prolific, the top 1%. So what does that mean about everyone else? And like, the top most prolific, only like the top 50 or top 100 of the 758. So the vast majority of people, they're just not even posting content, let alone thought leadership. Like essentially, there's more people talking about thought leadership and that SaaS CEOs should do thought leadership than there are SaaS CEOs producing thought leadership. Like there's more marketers telling CEOs what to do than CEOs actually listening to them. And I think that's hilarious. I think what's really interesting was that by far the highest engagement post type was VC funding round. So that you're going to get more engagement on a funding announcement than any other time. Some of the other posts that were really fascinating all came to extreme sports. So if you had done something like an Ironman and you post about it, like anything that's like an incredible feat got crazy engagement. So all you need to do is that. And then the third was like kind of emotional lifestyle type things. But yeah, I was kind of surprised by the frequency of posting, by what is thought leadership. But in the category, in terms of content, I think the thought leadership was like less than 5% of all the content types. So I classified all 24,000 thanks to the power of AI. And I found the number of thought leadership pieces is actually tiny. So it's not only frequency of posting is tiny, the number of thought leadership pieces is tiny. That's that one. Do you want me to go into the next project, or do you want to
I think
talk about that one?
yeah, that's interesting. Like, what's your take on that? Does that mean that it's not important, or does
Yeah,
that mean that there's again a big gap
yeah.
and we've got more work to do to get CEOs posting more thought leadership? What's your view?
Just to confirm, most of your listeners on the podcast, are they marketers?
Yes, they will be
So,
marketers
so,
or
so I'm just,
founders,
yeah. So
CEOs.
now I'm just going to have a sea of hate coming my way. Thank you. From what I'm about to say. Why does a CEO hire a marketer? It's because they're busy and they're hiring someone to take offload them with a part of the business they need to run, because they're doing fundraising and they have product and they have to hire and they have to do company culture and they do the investment. And like a CEO is like the busiest persona. But like in terms of the amount of fragmentation of activities they need to do is more intense than any other job title in a business, right? I'm not saying it's the hardest job, because I think being a middle manager in corporate America is probably a killer, but it's a grueling job. So they hire a marketer to help them in marketing. So I'm paying you money to come help me, and you're telling me I need to make time in the busy schedule that I have, in the time that I don't have, to post thought leadership to help you do your job. And then so you can help me help you build your business, because that's why you hired me. And the SEO is like, it's not that I don't want to do it. I don't have the time to do it. I don't have the energy and the thinking. I'm juggling like 16 balls. And I think it's just this tension between. The funny thing is, if I ask most marketers, do you have evidence from prior clients that producing thought leadership actually performs in a quantifiable manner? 9 out of 10 marketers will say, if I'm honest with you, one-on-one, no. And if I said, why do you think thought leadership? The truth is they're all following thought leaders on LinkedIn that are talking shit, that are saying that's what they should be doing. But they haven't validated, is the audience even on social? Okay, your CEO is posting on LinkedIn. Who's going to see the content? His connection base. Is his connection base your target audience? No. How are they going to see the bloody content? It's like basic things like how are you going to get the reach to the relevant audience that people aren't thinking about? Now think about the mechanics. They're just jumping into, we should be known in a category. We should be a brand to be reckoned with. We should be, it's really simple. You ask a question. Okay, name me the top 3 CRMs that come to mind, but don't tell me the names. I'm going to guess. You're going to say HubSpot. You're going to say Salesforce. You're going to say Pipedrive. There's 280 players in the category. And that's what people want. They want to be the number one in the category. And that's what they think thought leadership does. And I think it's a mental heuristic, it's a shortcut. Thought leadership doesn't get you to be number one in your category. It's doing everything better than your competitors. Better customer service, better product, better sales, better marketing. It's the sum of the business being superior, like an athlete who wins a gold medal versus a silver. It's not like one small thing they did. It's not like their morning routine included chai instead of coffee. And it's the chai latte that made them win the race. And that's like almost like what people thinking thought leadership is, like a silver bullet. So I think that's the problem. SEOs, they're busy. I don't think they've got evidence it performs. I think there's very, 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 very few of them. Like I did this the other day. I asked on LinkedIn, I asked in marketing communities, I asked SaaS experts, I asked in Slack communities. I said, everyone, give me a list of all the SaaS CEOs in the world who are thought leaders. Do you know how many people came up in that list? 16 people. How is that possible? And you realize there's very, very few Adam Robinsons or very few P. Plazas like CXL. There's just very few of them. And you realize there's just very, very few people doing thought leadership and doing it well. And therefore, it's very hard to say if that as a channel is actually going to perform. I actually have more evidence from fractional CMOs and CMOs. Like one of them works for a Series C fintech. So like this is a proper business, a sizable business with lots of customers. And they're doing it. And, it's grown the LinkedIn followers for the CEO and they're measuring it and the performance is not there. They're not driving a result. And you kind of go, why? Because thought leadership doesn't work? No, because of the way they're doing it. The type of content they're producing is not good. So there's like, it's not just does thought leadership work or not, it's how is thought leadership being done. So that I think that's like why thought leadership is a very tricky topic. It's how is it done? Does it even perform? Is a CEO bought in? Does he have the time to do it? What is the CEO's perception of a marketer when they suggest that they do it? What is the infrastructure for doing it? How prioritized is it? Is the mechanics in place? And as you can see, it's a very complex topic. On the surface of it, thought leadership, yes, no. In the nuance, intricate.
It's so interesting, and it's actually uncomfortable for me listening to you speaking through it because it challenges my own mental models around it too, if I'm honest. So it's why it's so interesting having a chat with you, Oren, because in my view, it's a fundamentally important part of what a business needs to do. Because then again, that's what I saw from my own perspective, from my narrow slice of the world that I see. I saw how important that was. I saw how important it was that when I got on a sales call, when someone had seen me on social, the impact that has and how that changes the dynamic of the conversation immediately. Suddenly feel like, oh, great.
Yeah.
It feels like you stimulate a connection and suddenly you've got a conversation about a post that you'd shared.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I experience this. I believe in thought leadership. Like I do it for myself. Like that's why I post every day on LinkedIn. That's why I've grown my follow account to 32,000. I have top voice badge, right? But I just don't believe it's right for every SaaS CEO. And I don't believe it's right if the mechanism isn't in place. And I don't think it's right just because I don't think we should take it as gospel. I think you need to really evaluate it thoroughly if it's right for your business type. If you go buy-in, do you understand the mechanics? How are you going to activate it? What is your alternative? What's the opportunity cost? It's like it requires more rigor rather than just say, yes, thought leadership is the way. Like, there's this one very well-known B2B marketing influencer that said, B2B marketing in 2024 is social. Is it? Because my client just grew to 250 mil through affiliates. Not a single freaking post on social. And I'm going to flip the question. if I can tell you how to build a 250 mil ARR business now, just an affiliate, would you still post on social? You say, screw social. If it gets me to my result. Like, the point I'm saying isn't that I don't believe in social. I'm very active in social. I see the benefits. It's just not right for every business. And marketing is way broader than just social. What about search marketing? That's like, the budgets for search marketing is like 50% of digital paid media goes to Google, and then you got Amazon. What about that? That's not social either. So I just don't think it's good to make these very broad statements that sound, I don't know what they sound like, clear. This is the way. But the reality is, if you're going in the wrong direction, you're moving further away from your destination, and yet you've got to make sure you're in the right, the you're heading in where you want to be heading, and don't just take what people say and go with that.
I love it. And well, I say I love it, but it's actually, like I said, it's uncomfortable for me to have this conversation, considering a lot of the listeners will be as into social as I am. I typically, my own failings as a human would typically say, oh yeah, social is marketing. It is important. It's how people get the word out. It's how word of mouth spreads, etc. I'm sure it probably plays quite a role in that affiliate example as well, with the affiliates sharing stuff on social, I imagine. But irrespective of that,
No.
Basically, it challenges all of my fundamental beliefs. So
I'm just saying it's not. I think it's right for most businesses. I do think most B2B businesses should be active on social, categorically speaking. But just because like 20% of them don't, and think about how many businesses, if we just took the UK, there's like arguably 5.2 million businesses, and you said, okay, 20% of them shouldn't be on social. That's 1 million businesses that shouldn't be on social. That's a lot. Maybe it's 10%. Okay, that's still a huge amount. Maybe it's 5%. That's still, you could be one of the 400,000 businesses that social is not the right way for you to grow your business. So I think these categorical statements, they make for a good, interesting conversation, but I wouldn't recommend building a marketing strategy out of them. That's essentially more, I think, where expertise comes in. It's like knowing how to discern trends in marketing. Because look, fundamentally, when I write a LinkedIn post, who is reading it? A lot of different types of people. You see, it's like any content you read in a blog or a webinar or a LinkedIn post is generic, because it's not personalized for an individual business. And that's how you need to think about content you consume. Is this tailored to a specific business? And if it isn't, it's probably something you need to think about, but not act upon, because it's probably is going to take you in the wrong direction. You need to evaluate it as a direction, is how to think about all content type, but not get emotionally attached to, like when I said the LinkedIn company pages are really like, they're crap. Like, don't bother. And like, wow, the backlash I had on social from all the marketers. I had LinkedIn company pages like attacking me, the moderators and marketers of LinkedIn company pages. And I was like, and then I posted the data and I did analysis. I think it was 434. Now I've got a new one with about 11,000. It's about to come out soon. And I think, I can't remember, it's like 98% of LinkedIn company pages have less than five likes, the average posts. It's like nothing. No one's seeing it. Like 98%, the majority. The majority of businesses don't know how to do it well. But spending money on something that's not done well isn't worth it. Just don't do it. Put your money into something else where you know how to do it and that you can get a result, rather than trying to do 10 things at the same time, but all of them average. And that's kind of the point I was trying to make. So I think that directionally is sensible. But also with that, maybe it's not applicable to your business. It's something for you to consider.
I think that's probably going to be my real takeaway from this conversation as well. I've got one more question for you, Oren, but like, it's the not being emotionally attached to the activities or falling in love with like the tactics. And I fall into that too, and I absolutely am guilty of that, because it challenges my fundamental beliefs. It's my worldview. So like anyone that has their worldview challenged, it's uncomfortable. And I think, I kind of thank you for this conversation, because it does force us all, because most of the people listening to this will be like me, heavily into social, etc., and will have seen the impact of it, but actually forces us to think through first principles. Like, at a fundamental level, like, is this going to work? We should challenge our existing beliefs. Everything that we thought we knew is true, is it? Like thought leadership, which has just become like a bit of a cliche anyway. It's just like, just do thought leadership, which we know, if done well in the right circumstance, with the right individual, with the right market, it can sing. And I've seen that firsthand. But if all of those other factors aren't in place, waste of time.
Yeah.
So really love that. But let's end on like, if you've got anything, any one or any business that comes to mind. You've mentioned like that's bad marketing, good marketing. You've used that phrase already today. Like, is there any examples that you point to for like examples or exemplars of good B2B marketing, irrespective of whatever channel has popped? Anyone you'd point to?
Yeah. So when I interview marketing candidates, because I screen and interview marketing candidates for clients, I ask them this question because I'm very interested in seeing. I say categorically, all the companies that you think would come to mind when I ask this question. The biggest client, the HubSpots, the Salesforces. So it's like, I think what's an interesting question is who's punching heavy on the notoriety that marketers value, but actually have disproportionately small teams. And I think, and I think it was, I commented on this. So Dave Gedhard, he put a post. He's like, "Who's killing it in B2B marketing?" And lots of people like, and then he said, "I asked in his marketing community. He's got 2,000 people." And then he curated a list. And I went and on one of the comments I left, I fetched the employee count. And I think one of the ones that came out that was interesting to me was Hockey Stack.
Okay.
And Hockey Stack, they're quite a small niche player in attribution. And, Rand Fishkin just had a go at attribution in his recent blog posts. It's quite interesting.
I saw that.
To think about, the wars, the wars in marketing, thought leader wars in marketing, because you kind of go, Rand Fishkin talked about it and suddenly they have a drop in net new customers because people who are buying them are marketers and believe attribution doesn't have legs. So it's quite interesting making this kind of interesting statement. I think, if Rand had got in the perspective of attribution vendors, hey, I spoke to 4 or 5 attribution vendors and now this is my synthesized view, that would have been a lot more insightful. It's like, look, I talked to them and I still think it's got no legs, then that would have given more credibility to his assertion. But generally, I said directly he's right about the cookie death and, ad blockers and the problems with attribution. But Hockey Stack, I think the reason I'm going to mention them is because I think their reports is one of the only vendors who's producing insightful reports with unique data insight. And, there's a few companies that do that. Mixpanel do it and Gong do it. I think Ebster do it. So there's a few different vendors who have unique data that they release publicly, like Carter. So I think all the businesses who produce unique content from their product insights, I would personally dub as like really interesting and cool, like great success. But some names that get popped out are like Chili Piper, Cognism, Clary. There's some of the I'd call these like challengers or contenders, are like smaller SaaS businesses rather than talking about large. And when I talk about social, I think one of the ones actually had done some work for them a while ago was Cereal, like cereal, the ones who do cereal. I think I'd recommend any marketing listeners go check out their LinkedIn company page because I think that's like probably an exemplar of what humor can do to build a brand and like really brilliant creativity. Obviously it's a B2C. I think, obviously Tony's, the chocolate bar. Look, I'm not so much into B2C, so I'm kind of just giving this to indulge people because I am curious. So I like picking things up. And, 11 years of my career was B2C first, and then B2B has only been the latter part. And I am really deep into B2B. But yeah, some of these brands, I think they do great jobs, specifically on LinkedIn, the company LinkedIn page. If for you who are listening, if you do have one who you think is doing great, just ping it over in a DM. I'd love to add it to my curated list of good examples. I'm always open to a message.
Hockey Stack is a good shout as well. Whilst you're talking, I was busy scrolling through their LinkedIn, and that's thought leadership done well, as an example, right? So
I think that's thought leadership as a brand. Done well, yes, not as an individual. Like that's content on the blog that their head of marketing is producing. I think Gong is a good example of this as well with Udi. It's like there's thought leadership as a brand and there's thought leadership as a person, and we need to delineate them because you can grow a business successfully through either.
Yeah, that's true. And where it's interesting, the first post that comes up is actually from their head of growth, because that's what they've reposted on their company page. But on a reposted post on a company page, which usually is a place where posts go to die, right? If someone's reposting something to a company page, to have 141 likes and 20 comments and meaningful comments from like good quality people, I'm like, okay, they've got the right target audience here, with the right kind of message. So I think it just goes to show like the kind of thing that your assertions that you're making about making sure the fundamentals are in place. That's a really good example of that, where a lot of the things we know to be true that you have challenged today, from a first principles perspective, is actually like represented in hockey stacks go to market. But clearly that works for them. I've evaluated it, etc. That's a really good one. That's completely new to me. So I'll link to those other businesses in the show notes. But Oren, any final thoughts you want to leave us with today? Because this has been a super interesting conversation. Always learn a ton every time I speak to you. So thank you.
Yeah, I think the learning is mutual, so I appreciate that. The last thing is that I had a point. You were saying you saw thought leadership work, and I think the reason you saw it work is you were on social, selling social to marketers who are into social.
Yeah, yes, kind of messy. Yeah.
Yeah. Now imagine selling payroll to CFOs of banking industry, in the banking industry only in Indonesia. That's it. That's your target market. Are you still going to do thought leadership on LinkedIn? Maybe not. Not if they're not active on it. So I just wanted to lend as to why we have these biases around different perceptions on what we read as generic advice on marketing, and why we need tailored marketing strategies for the businesses that we're supporting and working in. Obviously, for anyone listening, if you do have, you want to pick my brain on anything, just send me a DM. I'm always trying to help as many people as I can. My ethos in life. So don't just listen and consume. Feel free to reach out, drop a follow, send a message if you're stuck on something.
You're an absolute legend, Oren. Thank you for your time today. And I think this has been a super interesting conversation. Even if it does miss the killer thing, Oren says everyone needs to do this because it's going to explode their growth. We don't have that today, but we've got some realistic stuff, some actual reality, from someone that really knows their stuff across a number of different businesses. And I think that's the beauty in having this conversation with you. The range of context that you see things through really, really benefits everyone.
I could leave you with one of these like broad directional. Why not? Let's just drum and bit. But because someone has to do it, so I'll do it. I do think this micro influencers, the creator economy, is fascinating, and I think there are a lot of businesses who are seeing some really great growth with leveraging, the sponsoring of creators with content, and either redistributing that through paid and amplifying it, or just relying on that person's social following. These marketplaces are growing. I think it is a fast growing area, and I do think it's one of particular interest. Once again, I'm not saying that would work for your business. I don't think you should just jump into it. I think you should really rigorously evaluate it. But I think if you haven't, you're missing a trick. So I would leave. That's the closest I can get. Email marketing is everything statement.
I appreciate you dropping that nugget, and it's very, very closely aligned with one of my passionate beliefs. I know we were talking about that a lot last time we spoke, Oren. So, mate, this has been absolutely wonderful. Thank you again for all of this, and I'll make sure we link to all of your bio and stuff and your LinkedIn in the show notes. And I think everyone will learn a lot from this conversation, and will learn even more when they speak to you direct. So thank you again, mate.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much for watching or listening, and we'll be back next time with some more B2B leaders sharing more of their expertise around how they build brands and how they drive growth through content and community. Be sure to click like and subscribe to help this podcast grow, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.